Hello and welcome to today's recording about anger. Now, anger can really vary from feeling a slight frustration to really overwhelming rage. And I think it's something all of us experience in some form at some points during our lives. And we may or may not feel comfortable expressing it, talking about it, actually feeling it and letting it out. And that's why I thought it'd be really interesting to talk about it. Like all emotions, anger has a function. Anger is really great to draw boundaries, to really stand up for yourself, to basically take no shit from other people. And at the right time, it can be very, very valuable. What's not very healthy is holding on to anger for long periods of time, not processing the anger, just keeping it in, or either just being angry all the time. All of those things are not really helpful in any way, but it can be challenging to deal with anger, and that's why I wanted to talk about it today. So, a lot of us are brought up with the idea that anger isn't really acceptable. We've all seen those moments where a little kid is having a tantrum in a supermarket, and parents are just absolutely desperate and just really want the kid to stop. And that's totally understandable because that sounds very, very overwhelming, and I would be overwhelmed as well. But at the same time, if we're taught that we're not allowed to express anger at such a young age, how can we learn to do that as an adult? It's not like anybody teaches us how to do that later in life. And so there's a lot of us that go through life either just always shoving our anger under the rug and ignoring it altogether until we become a ticking time bomb and basically anything can set us up, or that are just sort of subtly anger all the time and take it out in places that feel more acceptable. So think about road rage, for example, or just yelling at sports matches. And while that may sound relatively innocent, it's not helpful for the person that is angry, and it's also not great for the person receiving it who usually didn't really do anything wrong. So, what are good ways to deal with anger? I think the first thing is to recognize when it comes up and what situation does it come up in. Is it at work? Is it in a personal situation with friends, with family? And if you can, pause for a second and see like what is making you so angry. And the thing with anger is that when we respond to it very impulsively, sometimes it can come out in a very harsh way. So anger definitely is one of those emotions where it can really be beneficial to take a step back, to process it for a second, and to then make our boundaries clearer, then set a boundary. Sometimes life doesn't give us that opportunity. If something happens to you and your boundaries are crossed right away and you feel like you have to respond at the spot, then by all means do. If your safety is in danger, if it feels very, very urgent, definitely stand up for yourself and show your anger in the moment. But if you have a moment to sit down to be like, okay, I'm going to process for a second what happened here, that can be very beneficial. So reflect on a situation and see what made you so angry, and see if you can really be in that situation. What made you so angry? How does the anger feel? Where are the sensations in your body that show you that you are angry? And see if you can allow those feelings. Just allow them, just notice them, just see what's going on. I think it can be very tempting with anger to go straight into like move your body and work out. And I think all of that can be very helpful. But see if for a second you can just allow the anger to be seen and processed by your body. How does it feel? How do you recognize it as anger? Now, recognizing something as anger can be very helpful for future situations because then you'll know when you feel those sensations that that's what anger feels like to you. Obviously, there's going to be thoughts running, but it can be really, really beneficial to focus on some of the physical sensations there as well. Now, for some people, this is enough. Some people can just notice the sensations and allow them to be felt. And at some point, they can feel their anger kind of go away. And they've come to sort of, a bit of a neutral state. And that can be a really good time to express your boundaries, to have a conversation with the person that made you angry and be like, hey, this is what happened and this is how I feel. But for a lot of people, I think it can be important to release some of that energy, and that can be through exercise, through moving. My personal favorite is to run around the room and make really annoyed sounds, to growl like an animal sometimes. It's really embarrassing. I don't want anybody around when I'm doing this, but it really helps me release that anger. I basically feel like that toddler having a tantrum in the supermarket, except I'm just in a room by myself. But I've noticed that that really helps me. And now is the time to find out what helps you to physically get that feeling out of your system. Allow that anger to move, allow it to express itself, whether that's through sounds or movements, or maybe you want to write down an angry letter. That's also something you can do. See what wants to come up, see what wants to be expressed, and really allow yourself to be with those sensations. And at some point, you'll notice that it sort of lessens and the feeling just kind of goes away and it sort of dissolves. And that is a really good moment to reflect on what made you so angry. What was really going on here? Was it actually the situation that happened, or was it an older, pain that was triggered by this situation? So, say you get really angry at your partner or your kids, but maybe it was something that happened at work where you feel like you couldn't express a boundary, and so you took it out on somebody else. And this is a time to get really into it, and it can be very painful to look at, but it's really important to know, is it this situation or is it something that was older? And take some time to write down what comes up, especially after releasing the sensations. It's very helpful. When you start doing that, when you're still actively angry, your emotions can totally take over and your brain can create a story. But I think after you get that feeling moving and after it dissolves, that is a really good time to reflect and to see what was really triggered here. Is it something that happened, or is it an old wound? Is it a feeling of not being good enough, of not being worthy? Is it a childhood memory that you still feel angry about? What is it that's really going on here? And I think the more you do that, the more you're comfortable with your own anger and the more you can really allow that feeling to come up, to process it through your body, the more easily you can recognize the feeling when it comes up, and the more you can reflect on whether it's actually the situation or whether something else is going on. And the more you look at the older wounds that the anger might come from, the less likely you are to take out your anger on somebody that didn't deserve it, or the less likely you are to really keep that anger in and allow it to become an unhealthy part of your life. Because anger that's not processed can really play a big role in your life. You can act like it's not there, but you'll look at the world through a lens of anger, and that will come out one way or another at some point. So it's very, very important to find a way to express your anger, to really allow the feelings to come up and be processed, and reflect on where your boundaries were crossed. Now, what's also important in this regard is that anger can often be a secondary emotion. So after processing that anger, what else is coming up? There might be sadness, there might be loneliness, disappointment, grief. There might be something else that comes up after the anger. And so see if you can make space for that as well. Do you notice any other emotions come up? Is there anything else that wants to be shown? Anger can be a way to mask other emotions because anger feels more empowering than loneliness, than grief, than sadness. So give yourself a chance to really look at what's beneath it, and if there's something else that needs to be explored when the anger has subdued a bit. Thank you so much for listening, and if you want to share your experiences with anger with me, feel free to do so. I'd love to hear your take on it.